Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are drawing a direwolf fossil, and this is another one from the set I'm doing using the photos that I took at the LaBrea Tar Pits. And it is just a coincidence, this was already planned. It is a coincidence that they recently announced the quote-unquote de-extinction of the direwolf. Yeah, other people have already posted videos about why that's not true, why they're not actually dire wolves, so I'll let you watch them. I thought it was sus from the beginning when they said gray wolf. I was like, why the heck would you use a gray wolf? Why not like a fox or a jackal or something, which is even more closely related? But whatever. It's cool nonetheless what they're doing. But yeah, not related at all to my original plans of drawing these fossils. So yeah, we're continuing on. This is the third one in the series. Similarly to before, in the last one I chose to use some colored pencil after I erased my, this is actually not the original sketch, it was transferred with the light thing, you know what I mean? Why can't I remember what, I can never remember what they're called. You know what I mean. So I sketched this in a different sketchbook, and then I made cleaner lines onto this Bristol board, and then I erased those lines and went over with colored pencils just so I could see it better. And then I went down with this E50 color from Copic and just started working from light to dark. Now this one was a little bit, I don't want to say super different from the other two, because the antique bison was pretty dark in some parts, but there were also some pretty big parts where it was lighter. And then I think the California saber-tooth one was generally lighter, and this one was like the darkest so far. So I just built it up little bit by little bit. It took me longer than I expected. This was like an hour and a half or an hour 40 minutes altogether, and it took me a bit to get to the darkest darks, because I say this every time, I'm a little afraid to go too dark too quickly because it's not easy to lighten things up. But actually I did an interesting thing at the end to lighten some things up with the color pencil, so I'll say that when we get there. But yeah, just working on the transitions. So I'm doing a lot of layering here, which I don't know if it's the right choice, because it did start to look a tiny bit patchy, especially if you don't wait long enough for the ink to dry. But once the darker colors got layered on top, you couldn't really notice that. So maybe I should have worked a little bit more slowly, or not taken all of the color over all of the spots, you know what I mean? Like I was putting color down where I knew darker color was going to go over it, and normally that makes things mesh together a lot better, but it does mean that you've got a lot of ink on the page. So from this distance, I don't think you can really see it as much as in person, but it did start to get a bit splotchy, which honestly for some things is okay. I like the texture, but yeah, it was a lot this time. A couple times I just sat or moved to a different spot to let the ink dry a bit. So I don't know if that was the best technique, but that's what helped me wrap my head around where colors should go, and not putting down darks too quickly to where it's scary, and I'll put it down in the wrong spot and not be able to get rid of it. So yeah, hopefully you can see what I mean by that. Once we get the darkest colors down, I'm coloring over the same spots over and over and over again, basically, and that is not always the best choice, depending on the type of paper you have. Bristol board, it sinks in a little bit more than the Copic paper, I think, but it still sits on top of the paper a lot, so it takes a bit for it to dry fully. So if you immediately layer, it makes it really easy to blend, which is a good thing, but if you immediately layer a lot of another color on top of a still wet color, it can kind of get splotchy. It can lift a little bit. So yeah, I was just going in and blending out some bits. This is it was really hard because it was dark and it was hard to tell like what shapes were where, if that makes sense. So hopefully it's anatomically correct. I tried my best to, I really tried to pay attention to what I was looking at. But like some of those darker bits, where the jaw joins, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it's accurate, but it was really hard to tell where things started and stopped and what was behind and what was in front. It's just a lot of shapes and gaps and stuff, so hopefully it looks okay. I think I can tell it's a dire wolf, yeah. I paid close attention to the nose because I know, if you compare a gray wolf skull, for example, with a dire wolf skull, their noses are a bit I don't know how you describe it, more like a fox, right, than a wolf. They're kind of higher, from the eye to the tip of the nose. It's more straight, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but hopefully I got the shape right. I went over it so many different times with different colors that I really definitely paid close attention to the shape of it. So we're nearing, I think, the last bit, the second darkest color, and this is where it felt like it started coming together. I was finally finding a lot of contrast. I was still wondering, here I'm putting a little bit of a more orangey color, because there were bits that were super orangey and yellowy as well, but I didn't want to go in straight with the lemon yellow on all of it. I did on the teeth. I did go in with the yellow on the teeth towards the end, and I do think it helped it look more like the picture. And then we just went, I think this is the darkest color, except I did go in actually surprisingly with a little bit of black colored pencil just to make some spots really, really dark. But this is the darkest bit. So basically what I was doing the whole time, and hopefully it's easier to see at this point, is I was filling in all the different shapes from light to dark, and just each time I went to a darker shade, it was a smaller shape, and then blending in some areas depending on if it was a smooth blend or if it was a hard edge. And this is where you can see there's the least amount of this color versus the largest amount of the lightest color. Though actually I think it's probably the largest amount of the second lightest color, because I really used that E50 color just for the biggest highlights, the lightest lights. And then I did go in just after this with some things to lighten it up, but I try to be I try to use things like gel pens and that white colored pencil, the Holbein one I always use. I try to use them sparingly because I don't want everything to look plastic or it does, and it also is not as effective. It doesn't stand out as much if you have so many different white spots. So I try to save the whitest whites for really the absolute minimum. So yeah, and I tried a little bit of a Copic brown there. I do really like that brown. It was a bit of a in-between. So just to sort of stretch out that darkest color a little bit, blend that out a bit without it being too dark, too far out. So yeah, a lot of going back and forth at this point because I felt even the lighter parts needed more texture and more depth. And I was kind of struggling at this point to figure out what I was missing. And then I started going in with the colored pencil, and it all sort of just came together. I found the edges again, and I think that's all it really needed was some of those darkest bits, the occlusions and the really dark lines in between the teeth where the light really doesn't hit at all. And also, again, using a similar color, like, so this is a dark brown. This is, I think, the burnt umber from the Arctic's, what is this, 50 set, 49, whatever it is. And that's essentially the same color as that darkest brown that I used. So I'm not trying to go too dark, like I'm not trying to do line art. I'm just trying to give it more depth, make it look 3D. And that's why I put the yellow on the teeth, and I think that really made the teeth stand out a lot more. That's what it was missing. Might be a little too yellowy, but it could just be the camera. But I don't think so. In the reference picture, it was pretty yellow. And so this is where I started adding light bits. So I put down the Holbein pencil, and I was like, that's too white. And then I went and put a yellowy pencil on top of it, and it looks so good. I was like, dang, I gotta try that again. And then look. I don't know if those details are just too small to notice. But I noticed them in person, and I thought it looked really good. So I'm going to try that again next time I need to lighten something up. Lay down the Holbein white and then the color I want on top, because the Arctic's colored pencils are not really opaque enough to layer on top of like dark colors to lighten them up, which is why I got the Holbein. Prismacolors are a little better, but I have very few colors in Prismacolors, so that's why I generally use the Arctic's. Yeah, and this is where I finished it off. We'll take a nice close-up here. Let me know what you think. Give the video a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more, because I have more of this set coming later. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!